What is good, everyone? This is your host, Deanna Radulescu with Label Free Podcast. Live your best life. You must live label free. Super pumped. I'm, as always, bringing you incredible guests from all over the world. My next guest is an author. She's a former educator and now an advocate for victim rights. Please welcome Paulette J. Buchanan. Paulette, thank you for joining us today. I'm super excited for the conversation.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. So before we get real deep into the nitty gritty, you've actually written, a couple books?
Just one.
Just one?
Yes, called Fighting for Justice, Religious Fraud, Mental Illness, and the Collapse of Law and Order.
Okay. And so you are also a former educator. Thank you for your service, because that cannot be an easy job.
No, it has its rewards, it has its benefits, but yeah, it can be extremely aggravating sometimes. But overall, I miss teaching, and I enjoyed it very much. But yeah, it is a difficult field.
Yeah, for sure. In a way, like what you are doing now, is kind of teaching people a little bit, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I make mention of that I basically have traded my being a teacher in a classroom to basically teaching other people and informing them about the way our country is not being run very well. Wow. From the state and local, state, and federal level. Yeah. And we have a voice. We need to make that our voices heard about that.
Absolutely. I'm right with you, sister. Totally agree. You have a very interesting story and why you are an advocate for victim rights and why you wrote the book. And we started talking about that a little bit before, we've talked about it a couple times. So I don't know where you'd like to start, because it is actually, it is, I'm going to warn everybody, it is a bit kind of a sensitive subject and a sensitive story. So just going to give you like that PSA before we get started, because God bless Paulette's heart, because she's gone through a lot, and I know other women that have gone through it too. So I'm going to let you kick off where you'd like to kick off.
Well, as in my book, I start off at the beginning, because I've had so many people ask me, why is your brother doing this to you? What happened? What did you do to cause this to happen? So as in my book, I will start off at the very beginning, that this really began when I was a child, I think even before I was born. My mother and other family members told me that before I was born, my brothers, right from the get-go, were very much against authority figures. They were very oppositional, very rebellious, seemingly lacking in empathy toward others. These are very dangerous signs. And even as an educator, I have seen some young students of mine acting in this way. And I don't know how much more you can nip it in the bud if there's something that's either genetic or something that, I bring up that argument, nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
But they really did not like me right from the get-go. The fact that I was female, because I tell people, what did you do to deserve this? What did you do to your brothers? I said, I was born female. Yeah. The youngest of my brothers, there's about a 7-year gap, which is a lot when you're younger.
There's how many of you?
I have 4 older brothers, and
brothers.
Right, and just myself.
Wow.
And as they got into their teen years, they just became more and more volatile to varying degrees. There were substance abuse issues in their teens and then in their 20s. And I've never had a substance abuse issue at all. I explain in my book how I got drunk once. I told myself I'm never doing this to myself ever again. I don't like that feeling of being out of control of my surroundings and stuff. So I never really enjoyed that at all. But that was one of the problems. They've had a difficult time holding down jobs. They've been arrested for all kinds of things, mostly violence against women. They have all been involuntarily committed into mental health observation and treatment. Wow. And these are issues which, again, none of these things have ever happened to me. Neither one of my parents were abusive to each other. They were brought up in a generation where, yes, they did do spankings and things like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, there were times when, for example, 2 of my brothers pushed my mother into the wall. Oh. And she was a very petite woman. She was my same height, but a much more slender build. She just bone structures is more slender. And when my father was alive and not having the best of health himself, he did eventually die of cancer, but he had heart issues before that. That he had to come to their defense, to my mother's defense, and sometimes to my defense. And so this was something where there was a volatility within them, I think, right from the get-go.
Yeah.
And so as I tried to help my brothers, as I'm growing up, I'm trying to understand, why are they like this, but I tried to help them. My mother tried to help them. My father died when I was 10. And I know that probably peers, I know for a fact their friends try to help them as they got into their 20s and their 30s. Their friends try to help them. And after so many backstabbings, basically, that, they would shed crocodile tears after they suffered consequences from their own poor choices. It got to a point where I just said, you know what? If they're not going to act like family, I'm not going to acknowledge them as family.
Yeah.
There's just too much abuse going on. There's too much where they have lied and manipulated. I'm not dealing with this anymore. And so, I pretty much tried to do everything I could to stay out of their lives and have them stay out of my life. Got my degrees, things like that, got onto my career as a teacher, all of that. In all various aspects of education, from college level on down to, kindergarten, basically, of teaching. And out of the blue, this one brother, he came after me with stalking, setting up websites, dozens of websites, not just attacking me, but other people, but accusing me of being a child abuser, when in fact,
my Lord,
he had been accused. There are records of him abusing his children. And so basically everything he did, he accused me of doing. I'm a domestic terrorist, I'm mentally unstable, and then harassing my employers, harassing our neighbors, harassing our friends, everything you can imagine. It was just every day. And we're knocking down these websites, and it's like playing whack-a-mole. You're whacking them down and he's setting them right up again. He's also a self-professed hacker. He was investigated and warned by the FBI to stop.
Wow.
It's ridiculous. It's like a bank robber, like the FBI saying, well, stop robbing
real.
banks.
It sounds like something you watch in a movie.
Oh, it is. It's crazy. And just really trying to figure out, first of all, I did get an arrest warrant for harassment against him in Connecticut, where I lived at the time. He lived at that time in Georgia. Okay. And they would not extradite him for a misdemeanor. And even honestly, we were told, even if they did, they'd give him a slap on the wrist.
Right.
And that's all. So I had the arrest warrant out on him. And, in one way, it acted as a protective order, because it kept him from coming into the state as he was threatening to do. But then he incited other people. We had, some goons hanging around our house. I had to miss a day of work, actually, one morning, because one was sitting in his car with a dog crate. I had a dog at the time. So, we lived off in the woods. You couldn't even see our house from the road. So I had to stay home. I reported the guy. The guy was arrested, but we could never get the police to investigate whether or not he had a connection to my brother, just crazy stuff, where he would put up insightful things on the internet and tell people where I lived and everything else. My husband and I trained for guns, to have guns. And at one point too, as it just kept escalating, there are victim advocates in Connecticut who said, you just need to get out of the state. This is what we tell other victims who are being aggressively stalked. Get out of the state, because you're never going to get any justice here. We were basically told that, yes, he's breaking the law, but no, we're not going to put out the money. Right. We were told that by state and then federal authorities, including, we went all the way down to Atlanta to try to reason with the assistant U.S. attorney down there to say, would you just please, he's committing all these cyber crimes that you are aware of, stalking us, stalking other people, harassing people, threatening people. These are crimes. There are actually federal stalking laws. Yeah. We went there fully armed with all the statutes, all of them. And they just outright told us, yes, he's breaking the law. No, we're not going to put out the money to do anything about it. And it's like, wow. They put out the money for all kinds of crazy things, but they would not put out the money to simply enforce the law and get him arrested. When you are in a situation like this of being victimized by somebody who is extremely mentally unstable, based upon some information that he sent to our attorneys that he was subpoenaed, and basically ordered by the court to submit certain medical documents because he kept claiming that I was causing him mental distress and all this stuff. And he named a psychiatrist, and he mentioned that the drugs that he was, prescribed for his mental condition, these are the types of drugs that are used for treating schizophrenia or severe manic depression. So we knew that unless he doctored these documents, which I don't know of whether or not he did, but if these are the medications he's taking, that he is severely mentally disturbed.
Yeah. Today's episode is brought to you by Honeylove. Ladies, let's talk about shapewear. We all know most shapewear makes you feel like you're being suffocated. That sexy dress in the back of your closet is so freaking cute, but the thought of having your inside squished by your shapewear is just not worth it. That's why Honeylove spent years researching and developing effective shapewear that's actually comfortable. Overly tight, cheap, and sticky fabrics that roll up are a thing of the past. Thanks to Honeylove, you can finally feel confident and comfortable in your favorite outfits. We have an exclusive deal for our listeners. For a limited time only, you can get Honeylove's best deal they offer. Get 20% off your entire order with the code LABELFREE20 at honeylove.com. That's right, ladies. Get 20% off of your entire order with LABELFREE20 at honeylove.com.
One of the tactics that people like him can do is they get on the internet and they commit all kinds of fraud against people. They commit all kinds of scams. And one of his big tactics is the religious scam angle. And that's what he does. He runs these ministries, and he gets these people from all over the world: Kenya, Nigeria, in the Asian areas, Philippines. It's all over the place that he gets these people, duping them into, he gets dreams and visions from Jesus, telling him all these things. And, then he goes after me as his primary persecutor. So the next thing you know, we're getting stalked by people in our area. But, it's just, they come around, they take pictures of our house, that kind of thing, call me on the phone. Because again, he is a hacker.
So does he still stalk you?
It has diminished significantly, in large part because our attorneys told him, if you keep this up, and the police have told him, if you keep this up, we are going to haul you in. Yeah. And also my websites, that if he starts naming me, as he did in the past, in his own chat room post, I guess they're called social media posts, that people look my name up. And he's complained about, people attacking him online and, dredging up all these things that they claim I've done. Well, he has done them. One of the things I tell victims is, when you're dealing with somebody who is a cult leader, which is essentially what he is, they have made themselves a limited purpose public figure, right? Which means they're open to public scrutiny. Which means if they have police records, court records of any kind, whether it's criminal court records, civil court records, you can post those. Yeah. Because the public has a right to know. That's one of the things we were advised by attorneys years and years and years ago. But one of the things that, of course, he did, and I write about this in my book, is he sued us 9 different times in 3 different states, in both state and federal court. He is an abusive litigant. He has been finally designated as an abusive litigant. He's lost every single lawsuit he's filed against me, against his ex-wife, against her husband. There was a church.
He had to get the money to do that, because that takes incredible resources to.
Actually, it doesn't. It does not. It only costs maybe $250, $300. You file a lawsuit. You do it what you call pro se or self-represented. He never hired an attorney.
Oh, I got
and yet it costs us tens of thousands of dollars to hire an attorney to get his ridiculous lawsuits dismissed. And, we did run across, this is one of the other problems with this kind of what's called stalking through the courts, is that, victims have a very hard time finding a good attorney, because a lot of attorneys recognize that for whatever reason, the courts, and I do kind of go into the reasons of this in my book, the courts allow this abuse of the court system. They know full well that these people do not have legitimate lawsuits, but they just open the courtroom doors wide. It brings in money. It brings in a need for more judgeship positions. Yeah. You have a glut of attorneys, and there you have it. And that really is the reason why it's
a vicious circle.
Oh yeah,
just
absolutely.
To keep the machine running, I guess you'd say. So do your other brothers, who does your family, your other brothers, do they know what this brother is doing?
Oh, absolutely. Initially, they kind of gave indications they didn't want to have anything to do with it because they all kind of hate each other. And as I mentioned in my book, they really
Terrible.
don't like each other very much, but they hate me more than they hate each other. So like the enemy of my enemy is my friend type of deal.
Yeah.
And they absolutely joined in with him. In when he would file the one law, actually there are two lawsuits in Connecticut in probate court. They wanted to dig up my mother's remains after
Oh
she
my.
passed away. Oh
So
yeah, it's just insane stuff. Claiming that her will wasn't legitimate because she cut them out of her will, and so I mean they've all joined in, they've all helped, but the one is definitely the ringleader. I don't know if they're profiting off of his religious scams at all, but they all have their own issue. One other brother, he also abuses the court system to file lawsuits against people. In his case, he's indigent. So he gets our tax dollars are paying for lawyers to represent him in some of his lawsuits.
oh my Lord.
So,
Wow.
oh yeah, I mean, it's
This is
our
pretty bizarre. Like, oh
yeah,
my goodness. So when
yeah.
did it start calming down?
It started calming down when we started getting the judgments. In 2018, when he sued us in
Okay, so a couple
Tennessee,
years ago.
right? Um, we and other victims contacted our legislators, and they had proposed a abuse of civil action law. And what that law did was basically identify an abusive litigant. And most of the time, they are pro se. Most attorneys will not represent them, even if they sought to have an attorney represent them.
Yeah.
But we got that law passed, signed by the governor, and we used that law in 2018 to finally get him designated an abusive litigant. And he turned right around and he sued us even more out of state, out
Yeah.
of Tennessee, where we moved to, again, on the advice of victim advocates. And we were able to get our Tennessee judgment enforced. Like he tried to sue us in Connecticut again. Full faith and credit. That's what our U.S. Constitution gives us. And the judge looked at it and said, you know what? We're going to honor the state of Tennessee's judgment. You are an abusive litigant. We're not going to allow this lawsuit to go
Good.
fly. We got the judgment and injunction against him in Tennessee, domesticated in Georgia, in those court systems. The federal court is a little bit funky. And again, my book goes into the need to reform our entire court system. This should not happen.
Yeah.
And previous generations of judges would have never allowed this kind of abuse of the court process. They would have recognized that there's a certain dignity that you have to have in the court process. If
Yeah.
people lose faith in the court process, that's a big deal. And a lot of people have lost faith in the court process. So there are still some few judges of an older generation who they see a lawsuit coming across a desk like this. They don't even give it a docket number. They just said, nope, we're not having this. This is not going to happen. But unfortunately, too many judges do allow these kinds of, I mean, clearly on the face of it, absolutely meritless, harassing, defamatory lawsuits to go forward. And you have to basically essentially argue that 1 + 1 really is 2. It takes a lot of time. If you think about it, you're ordered to go to a court at a certain place and time, and you are standing within feet of the person who is stalking you, issuing death threats against you, all of that. And you have to have your attorney, who's also really in danger as well, as is the court,
Sure.
explain the whole situation to a judge. And honestly, in my brother's case, I mean, they had security heightened at the courthouses where he was, both on the state and federal level, because of his aberrant behavior. It's very aggressive, very alarming behavior. And he boasts about it. He thinks it's funny.
Terrible.
I mean, it goes back to childhood. I've seen my brothers laugh hysterically when they plan to do wrong to people, when they plan to hurt people, or when they accomplish hurting somebody. They always found it immensely hilarious.
Wow.
It's truly pathological. And, that goes into kind of the other part of my book, because I mentioned the religious fraud, but also the mental illness. We don't have a mental health system anymore. In the times when my brothers have been committed into mental health treatment, it's only been for a matter of days.
Yeah.
That's not enough to treat somebody who has severe
Oh,
mental
no.
health issues,
No.
So we need to bring back reasonable, sane commitment laws. for either long-term care or permanent care for people who honestly cannot function in society. And we need to set up compassionate and competent healthcare centers, like we have nursing homes, like we have hospitals.
Yeah.
Are there bad hospitals? Are there bad nursing homes? You bet. But we don't shut down the whole system. You don't throw people with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease out onto the streets. And that's essentially what our mental health system did over a period of time, is throw out people who just cannot take care of themselves and are truly a danger to themselves and others.
So what would this book be good for?
This book, I think, would be good for encouraging other victims of this kind of crime. It would be good for people to understand if they have somebody who is severely mentally disturbed in their lives, either a family member or perhaps a former partner, something like that. But it's also good for legislators. In fact, one of our own state legislator endorsed my book, our representative, and it's good for judges. In January, there is going to be a new crop of judges sworn in. And we are going to, at the recommendation of an attorney who works for the Bar Association, who is a liaison between the Tennessee Bar Association and the legislature, she said, write to the judges, write directly to them, explain how you have been impacted by these judges allowing these ridiculous lawsuits to go forward. So that's what we're going to do. I really encourage people to speak up. And that's one of the things that stalkers or any kind of abusive person tries to do, is they try to silence you.
Well, right, because they try to scare you. Where can people find you, connect with you, and purchase your book?
They can connect with me on 3 different websites that I have. The first one is for my book, www.fightingforjusticebook.com. My other website is stopabusivelawsuits.com and stopreligiousfrauds.com. And they can also purchase my book on Amazon as either a paperback or a Kindle.
Excellent. Thank you so much. You guys, I'm going to put those links in the show notes. So if you or anyone you know has been a victim to stalking or any type of issues within the court system that was unmerited, do not hesitate to go purchase this book, or reach out to Paulette and learn a little bit more on how you can protect yourself, and go to writing your local judges, your state judges, what have you, to see how you can protect yourself moving forward. Paulette, this is the part of the show where I like to ask for last words of wisdom or advice. What would you like to leave with the audience today?
I would like to encourage anybody who is going through this kind of ordeal. First of all, you're going to have days where you feel like running for the hills, but you stand up and you fight. And because you have a voice, the truth is on your side. You speak up. You find good people who will help you and who will support you, and you speak up. And don't ever think you're not worth fighting for. We all have value and worth, and you are worth fighting for. So fight, speak up, make your voice heard, speak the truth.
Amen. Woo! With that being said, thank you, Paulette, for your passion around the subject and doing what you're doing to help protect other victims out there that might be unable or very scared to use your voice. So keep fighting that good fight. We appreciate you for all that you're doing.
I appreciate being here and helping other people as well. And I appreciate the work you're doing to do the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You guys, this is your host, Deanna Radulescu with Label Free Podcast. Live your best life. You must live label free. Please don't forget to subscribe, follow, rate, review, comment, share, all those good things. And I'll be back soon with more dynamic guests.